Welcome to Crush Pod. This is episode 3. I am your host, Madeline Dennison, an associate marriage and family therapist who is fascinated by all things crush psychology. Today, we have the pleasure of spending time with a graduate student who is writing his thesis on parasocial relationships. And this has been a necessary concept to bring into the discussion of Crush Pod since the genesis of it. We've always been wondering, how much are we going to allow somebody to bring up the experience of having a romantic parasocial relationship or a parasocial crush? And it hasn't happened yet with the participants that we've had. And so it was so wonderful getting to talk with Jake today about what a parasocial relationship looks like, what the benefits are, what some of the drawbacks are, and kind of what his thesis is and what he's focusing on. We obviously talk about crushes a lot, but we also really focus on this intangible liminal space of parasocial relationships, which really is the running theme and genre of this podcast. So I know that you're going to enjoy it. This one is just such a thinker. I'm sure you're going to have a million questions. So we're definitely going to be having Jake back on at some point to answer all of your and our continued questions. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Crush Pod. Today we have on Jake Stewart, who is a newer friend who is studying something that is really cool and that we've kind of been wanting to talk about since we were coming up with the idea for Crush Pod. So, Jake, why don't you just start with telling us a little bit about yourself, where you go to school, and what you're focusing on?
Cool. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
My name is Jake. I'm a first-year grad student at Cal State San Marcos. And of course, I'm studying parasocial relationships. Now, if you had told me over the summer that I would be doing that, I would have said, what's a parasocial relationship? But I got accepted into grad school, and my PI and I have completely different research interests, completely diametrically opposed. So we were like, okay, well, what can I do? And we've been brainstorming. And she says, well, I have this undergrad who is a business student, but they, kind of dip and dabble in psychology, and they're interested in parasocial relationships. And she says, I'm thinking this might be interesting for your thesis project. I'm like, okay, cool. Tell me what a parasocial relationship is, and then we can see if that sounds good for my thesis project. She tells me, and instantly I was very intrigued. Personally, I'm interested in factors like loneliness, well-being, social anxiety, and those things. So my first thought was, how can I apply these things to now these parasocial relationships?
Yeah.
So we went full steam ahead. None of us, not myself, not my PI, knew where to even begin. We had no kind of baseline knowledge of parasocial relationships, so we kind of just dove headfirst into it, and here we are, and it's been very interesting.
This is so exciting because it's very relevant to this whole idea of crush psychology and what we're talking about here, especially because, as you and I were saying right before we were recording, talking about liminal spaces and like these kind of back rooms of psychology where it's like there's not that much attention given to it, and something like parasocial relationships where they've been around forever, but they look very differently now. So if you could just give us like one fact that kind of like blows your mind about parasocial relationships, or one part that really made you feel interested in it this past semester, and then we'll dive into the assessment.
That's really hard because obviously I'm biased. I think there's a lot of things interesting about them, and you hit the nail on the head. They were first introduced as an idea in like 56.
Yeah.
They're not new, and
Yeah.
they probably go back even further than that. But something that I find very interesting, very early on in my study of them, I learned about something called the Panksepp-Jacobson hypothesis. And it basically suggests that our brains are so ancient, the circuitry is so many years old that it doesn't have, any dedicated area to processing media, for example. So this can be taken to mean that when we're, interacting with parasocially, say in a relationship, our brain doesn't necessarily recognize it as media. It just recognizes it as a person, as a relationship. So that can then be taken to mean to our brain, it's not all that different than a face-to-face reciprocal relationship. And obviously, our logical self knows it's different, right? But our brain is potentially processing these parasocial relationships the same way it would like this, just like a face-to-face, relationship.
Right, you're getting the same chemicals. And in psychology, they teach us, one of the practices we do in the therapy room is if you have something that you really need to get off your chest and say to a specific person, there's this empty chair technique where you imagine the person sitting in that chair and then you say exactly what's on your heart. And what we find by doing brain scans and looking at, the hormone levels and the stress and all of the stuff is that all of these same chemicals are released in your brain of as if that person was actually there.
Wow.
And it's fascinating because this isn't a phone call and it's not parasocial where you like have a photo of them even. It's fully imaginary. And so we are going to be going like slightly fantastical today. That seems to be the vibe of the pod today.
Great.
So I'm really excited that you agreed to come on this. And I'm going to dive into the crush assessment side of things. So, question 1, tell us about your social location. So, your sexuality, your pronouns, if you have a religion of sorts, where you grew up.
Okay. Well, so, yes, I'm, identify as he, him, his, heterosexual. I'm in a long-term relationship. What else was
Did you grow up in San Diego?
So, I've lived all about. I was born in Camarillo, California, which is a little bit north of here. I moved to Delaware, which a lot of people think Delaware. How many people do you know from Delaware? Well, I lived there for 7 years. I moved back to San Diego.
Okay.
Or back to California, rather, to San Diego. I moved to Philadelphia, and then I moved back to San Diego. So,
wow.
I've been back and forth with, nowhere in between. But I've been in San Diego for a while now, probably, 15 years or so.
Beautiful.
So I've been in San Diego for a while.
And you mentioned you're at San Marcos.
Yeah.
And how old are you?
So I'm 27.
Okay, fantastic. How would you define a crush?
Oh, dear. Okay. Probably not accurately, but I'm going to give it my best shot.
Yeah.
How would I define a crush? And maybe I should have done a little bit of homework on the definition of a crush. Well, first of all, I would say it's not limited to any age group. I think anyone can have a crush. And I think when I think of a crush, I think of like a positive feeling. I think you feel affectious towards something, and maybe it doesn't have to be a person, but I would say more often than not, it would be a person.
Right.
And I would say that, we associate that word with like kids.
Yeah.
Or, adolescents, but I think that anyone of any age can have a crush on someone or something. Maybe they can be maladaptive, but my thinking is a crush is a positive kind of sweet thing.
That is a fantastic definition. And I love that you started with saying that persons of any age can experience crushes. We talk about them here on Crush Pod as like crushes are what helps us build essential intimacy skills. And so that's like the evolutionary definition behind why crushes happen over a lifetime. But honestly, it makes a lot more sense in this childhood adolescence phase. So you're totally right there. Okay, we're going to dive into your emotional intelligence.
Uh-oh.
We are using the BEIS, as I have mentioned before, and I know you were slightly hesitant to want to do this assessment. Everyone is, so
good.
I just want to share that your highest score is on the regulation of your own emotions.
Okay.
Does that sound accurate to you?
It does. It does,
okay.
yeah.
And how do you think that affects your propensity to experience a crush and maybe confess that crush to the crush object?
Okay. Well, I would say that I'm always very mindful of the way I feel. In any given moment, literally ask myself, how do I feel right now?
Okay.
And that can be any number of things, right, throughout the day. But I would say I'm very mindful of that. And accordingly, I try to be very, intentional with that. So, for example, what's a good example? Okay, if I'm feeling, down, as anyone is, or upset, then I try not to act, and I try to be mindful of that, and I try not to really do anything to where, I would regret it later. Whereas I like to maybe act on my, if I'm feeling more positive or happy in a moment, then I'll try to capitalize, if that makes sense.
Yeah, use it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. I like the low reactivity to negative emotions.
Right.
That's essential.
exactly,
That's like essentially regulation,
Right.
right? Like giving yourself space
Right.
when you're feeling down. How many past relationships would you say you've had?
So the one I'm in now would be the only serious,
Amazing.
significant. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, fun. You're our first candidate with one relationship, so this
Yeah.
is exciting.
Yep.
Okay, and how long have you been in this relationship?
Coming up on 4 years.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Nobody does that anymore.
Yeah.
And tell us about whether or not you've experienced a crush while you've been in this relationship on somebody other than your partner.
See, I was getting ready to say yes, my partner. No.
Okay.
No, I would say not. No. Flashback to a little over 4 years ago before we started dating. We had always known each other for a long time. It was like a mindful thing. I knew I was never going to get into a relationship unless it was absolutely right.
Wow. Okay.
And I mean, you never know, but unless I knew that it would, be something that could last. So I had a big crush on my girlfriend, of course. So then I knew that I would only act on that if it could, blossom into like
a long-term development.
Exactly, right.
Interesting.
So I guess that's it.
It's early, but I kind of want to relate that to your values inventory. So you chose 5 values, and they were, is it okay if I share all of them?
Let's do it.
You said having peace and quiet, being calm, learning new things, intelligence, and being in control. And I mean, this definitely sounds, you have a lot of stability here of, being in control, being calm, and this impetus on peace and quiet. And I wonder how that translates into this, predisposition of, I only want to get into something if I know it's going to turn serious. Because that's also a unique posture for people our
that's
age.
very true. And you're right. You don't hear of like 4-year relationships, very
Yeah.
often. But
For somebody in their 20s, no, right?
That's very true. I really like certainty, and I think on some level, like everyone does, innately we like certainty. We like reliability just as humans. But I really dislike uncertainty.
Yeah.
I want to know what to expect as much as possible. I want to know what's going to happen. And yeah, I think that ultimately drove, the long-term relationship. It was not going to happen unless I could be certain. And again, like, are you ever fully certain, really, of anything?
Yeah.
Probably not. But, I like to be confident, at least.
Yeah.
And be as sure as possible.
And there are measures of success, I would say. I am wondering, do you find that any of these values or this fixation on, like, certainty, does any of that play into your research subject? Like, where does certainty come into parasocial relationships? Because the one thing we were talking about is that there's no reciprocation.
That's very interesting. Well, here's one thing I will say, and this is answering from the perspective of someone who's in a parasocial relationship, which I don't believe I am. However, one thing about parasocial relationships is you can invest as much or as little as you want. There's a ton of certainty there, in fact, because the person's never going anywhere, or whatever the object of your, parasocial relationship is. Even if they pass away, the media lives on, or the videos or the movies or whatever. And not only that, but you don't have to worry about them investing as well, or putting your pride on the line or rejection or whatever. As someone, if you're engaging in a parasocial relationship, the ball is completely in your court.
It's forever.
It is forever. And, there might be a falling out where, they say something you disagree with.
Yeah.
Or whatever the case, something goes on. But for the most part, the ball is really in your court. And there's a ton of certainty there.
Wow.
Which is very interesting.
Fascinating.
Because you see how it's such an appealing alternative for somebody. Like, I can invest as little or as much as I want.
Yeah.
And I can benefit from this.
Yeah.
And nobody knows the difference.
And the second I'm not benefiting, I can cut it off.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, that's the hardest part about being in a relationship is that there are going to be moments and seasons of, like, growth where you're no longer the same people you were when you started the relationship, especially in a long-term relationship.
And especially when you started young. And
Yeah.
You're still very much in, formative years.
Yes. And, like, necessary development that's taking place that makes it hard to stay in dialogue with somebody. over time. And these parasocial relationships, you're giving what you want to give to it, and you're getting what you want to get from it.
100%.
It's so
100%.
selfish.
And again, when you put it like that, it's totally selfish. Right? It's so self-fulfilling. But when you put it just like this, like, you get it.
Yeah.
You get why people would engage in a
Yeah.
parasocial relationship. And again, you know, a lot of people don't do it mindfully. They're not like, they don't wake up one day, gee, I'm going to seek out a parasocial relationship.
Yeah.
You know, they're seeking connection, or it just happens organically, but you totally understand why. You know, it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. I want to ask you 2 questions. The first is, how would you, because we were talking about like success in relationships and, you know, the difference between real relationships versus parasocial. How would you define a successful relationship?
This is going to sound way too reductive.
Okay.
But I think it's a relationship in which both people are significantly happier than they otherwise would be without the relationship, and it's not at the expense of the other person's happiness.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's easy. Beautiful. You have a good way of reducing things to like their core meaning.
I hope.
So,
I hope.
Yeah.
So,
no,
like,
allow me to compliment you there.
Right.
Like, that was a great definition. Now, second part, how would you define a successful or beneficial parasocial relationship? Because we were talking before this about how there are benefits and
That's right,
cons.
yeah. So to be sure, you know, again, coming into this, I would think they're mostly maladaptive. This is what I would have guessed. I would have guessed they're problematic more often than not. Overwhelmingly, they're very positive for people. What I would say is that a successful parasocial relationship is one that's fulfilling for somebody, and they're better off with it than without it. However, it doesn't come in replacement, or it doesn't supplant their real world relationships.
Right.
So it's something that comes in addition to, not, you know, in space of.
And you were using the term prosocial, like a prosocial or extroverted person is able to experience parasocial relationships because they're already getting their cup filled from like their social extroversion.
And it does make sense because we know, like, you know, people who are, say, lonely, they have these negative schemas about social interactions, and what happens is they sort of eject, you know, they don't participate, and then it kind of oscillates. It's now this kind of loneliness feeds more loneliness. Well, that's we're seeing in parasocial relationships. They're not even engaging in those because they have these, you know, presumably they have these negative expectations about even those relationships.
Tell me more about
parasocial. So, again, it would seem intuitive that, oh, you know, someone feels lonely, they can turn to a parasocial relationship. And in some cases that can be true. But because lonely people have, you know, negative expectations of social interactions, they'll be judged, they'll be ridiculed, it'll be awkward. You know, they just abstain from participating altogether. And, you know, I mentioned the Banks-Jacobson hypothesis.
Yes.
This would be consistent with that. All the same, in parasocial relationships, they're just not even bothering.
Yeah.
They're not even engaging in those. The only people that are really engaging in those are people who there's literally really no chance for them to find like others in their kind of vicinity. So, for example, I had mentioned this earlier, you know, during during COVID-19 quarantine, you saw, you know, students who literally could not possibly connect with people, you know, face to face, were resorting to parasocial relationships. Or another study, which I find so fascinating, LGBT teens specifically, you know, they have fewer opportunities for those connections in their immediate circle, and therefore are more likely to seek out parasocial relationships to sort of fulfill that need.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the specific, you know, the it depends context.
Yeah.
But, you know, big picture, broad spectrum, lonely people behave the same way parasocially as they do, you know, face to face.
It's so interesting.
It really is.
And it does make sense with what you said earlier about how the parasocial relationship and, you know, not necessarily having a person present with you, when you're communicating, it can elicit a lot of the same brain chemistry and reactions and level of fulfillment. And I know that you mentioned the hypothesis. I forget the name.
It's a mouthful.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can you restate that for us? Because I'm not sure we were recording when you were first talking about it.
Yeah, the Banks-Jacobson hypothesis.
Yes.
You know, long story short, it was these two fellas didn't come together and coin this. They each have separate contributions. 10 years ago, someone got wise and put them together and applied it to like a parasocial context.
Got it.
Basically, its origins are in the fact that we don't even have brain circuitry for like reading literature. And literature is how old? It's eons old. So we definitely don't have brain circuitry for media. So it's no wonder we process media. Media figures the same way we process like face-to-face figures.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, I think it was right before we started, but it's this whole idea of brain circuitry, and then you mentioned you come into a community when you're in a parasocial relationship with an icon like Taylor Swift. We were talking about the Swifties earlier. And you said people come for the relationship and stay for the community.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
It's really interesting, and it keeps feeding into like you understand it so much. It makes so much sense why someone would engage. So, we all do it. We all engage with a significant person, athlete, Taylor Swift. K-pop groups are notorious for that.
Yes.
And that's great and all, and it's not even like you become disenchanted with the initial object of your interest. You can still like, Taylor Swift. You can still like, Rihanna, whoever it is, but what you find is that community. And that is a sort of a different area because now it is reciprocal, and there is, a real exchange, But I think it represents an interesting area of research where you come for one thing, but you stay for the other. And you find that community,
It's like a relational function.
Right.
And
right.
it's especially not a bad thing if the social connectivity goes up because of a parasocial relationship. So and so that's another like benefit that we don't really expect from it. And you mentioned that like social deficits can predict parasocial relationships, but it's like really in order for people to connect, they really just need one thing that they have in common, that they can find in common. It. Aside from like having a body,
but you're right.
Possessing
like,
breath.
Yeah, like we've seen the studies, where if someone has the same birthday as you,
you're
marginally more likely to just like them more.
Yeah.
It means nothing.
Yeah.
But you're still, so if you can just have one thing, favorite sports team, a musician.
Right.
Just to get you in the door, and that's sometimes all you need.
Well, and crushes are so often doled down to the mere exposure effect.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, I see this person on a consistent basis, and now I have feelings for them. And it's like, I didn't choose this. My brain predicted it. Like, my psychology demanded it. And so it's fascinating that kind of follows over with these parasocial relationships. But I also want to reference, I feel like we've said several times, they're not replacements for real connection. Can you tell me more about like why a parasocial relationship can't replace that?
Definitely. And it's definitely encouraging, right? Like,
yeah.
Because we talk about how good they are, and they are in many ways.
Yeah.
To be sure. There's really no way, around it. But it's encouraging that at the end of the day, like, nothing can replace this, like reciprocal face to face. Strong evidence we have of that. There's a study just a few years ago where basically, people, to sort of shorten it, people feel really good after they've engaged face to face, and they feel actually just about as good when they've faced a parasocial relationship. However, specifically loneliness is only reduced in this setting, in a face-to-face setting. Loneliness is not reduced in people when it comes to interacting with their parasocial relationship, their most beloved parasocial relationship.
Wow.
And it really speaks to how indelibly social we are.
Yeah.
I mean, just from day one, and if there's no replacement for that by now, then there never will be,
Well, and it speaks to the root of like the loneliness epidemic that we're seeing. And I know we talk a lot like on social media about the male loneliness epidemic. And we were talking about like incels and parasocial relationships earlier, or like men with like sports teams and coming together. And it's almost like parasocial relationships are a symptom of the problem and a symptom of the potential solution.
Right.
Like it's such a duality here.
It really is. And I will say, so, in my literature review that I was stressing out about for months now, my argument was that for, chronically lonely people, I think there's something there in terms of just some form of interaction, just something, you know, because unfortunately these people, this like 15 to 30% of the population is so longing for connection that I'm all for it, you know, in terms of finding a fulfilling parasocial relationship. But more than that, I'm all for it for like the it depends people.
Yeah.
The people who are marginalized, or the people that just really there's no chance for them, or there's a small chance for them to you know, mingle with like others, you know, with similar others. I'm all for it. Because, and this is actually very interesting in the initial study from 56, it's always cool when old studies have some merit, because a lot of times, you know, science evolves.
A lot of times they were super unethical.
You're right, completely unethical.
And they traumatized their participants.
Right. And then we use the word famous. They're famous. Yeah. Like, okay, well,
they're well known for killing people.
No, literally, right? So it's encouraging when something holds up and it was ethical and like,
yeah,
it's all fine. So in this study, they basically said, what could be more natural than someone seeking connection seeks it any way they can find it?
Yeah.
And I totally accept that. I do, because it just goes back to what I said, you know, if people are not fulfilling that need reciprocally, you know, face to face, at least they can kind of, you know, like scratch that itch.
Yeah.
Parasocially.
One of the reasons I really wanted to have you come on the podcast and talk to anybody about this is because I see a lot of people in my generation who have parasocial crushes. So parasocial romantic relationships, or did we say romantic parasocial relationships? RPSR? RPSRs. I see a lot of people that are so, it's almost like the romantic element of their life, they get fulfilled through their parasocial relationship, because like you said, there's no risk and there's no reciprocation, and there's the ball is entirely in your court. And there is a huge risk element to having a crush. And like at the end of these podcast episodes, we ask like, would you like to call your crush? It's such a huge question, because our generation is going through, and honestly, other generations are also going through, like, relationships. Big relationship is down. And so across the board, when it comes to friendships, communities, but especially romantic partnerships. And so like the whole reason we started a podcast is we were like, how do we talk about crushes better? Yeah. How do we understand ourselves when we have a crush better, validate it, and then like actually communicate it to the object of our affection?
There's the hard part.
Because, I mean, we do learn, I think, what you're saying is we do learn to a certain extent how to communicate it to our object of devotion in a parasocial relationship. But what if, like, is it reasonable to say that it's possible to get the romantic cup kind of filled by a parasocial relationship?
I would say this, because that's like the question.
Yeah.
That is the question.
Yeah.
Like, you know, how many times has the average person gone on a date and they're late, they're obnoxious, you know, fill in the blank with all these negative things, and it's happened repeatedly. You know, people on the internet, we see the best of them.
Yeah.
Great photos, the exact message they want to send. They could have recorded a video 20 times before they hit post for that one.
Yeah.
If it's their music, it's been perfectly crafted, you know, to sound the way it does. Everything we see is the very best, really, of humanity. You know,
yeah,
it would seem
to the point where it's almost inhuman.
Where it's completely devoid of like humanity. But the point is, it's no wonder that fills the romantic glass for some people, because it's the absolute ideal. You know, it is the exemplar of either friendship or romantic interest. You know, whereas in person, most of us have dealt with it too many times, where just these undesirable dates, and just we become disenchanted with the whole like process of, you know, the dating scene. And so it's no wonder people like scratch that itch, you know, on the internet, because it's perfect, you know, or at least it seems perfect.
It's Plato's, you know, realm of forms of
right.
of romance.
That's right.
It's
just
so tough. Yeah, it really is so tough. And you know, we were talking about limerence a bit before too, because I like it because it's kind of like a crush that turns almost aggressive and starts to negate the humanity of the limerent object. So there's the limerent experiencer and the limerent object. And we were talking about, you know, the downsides of parasocial relationships, and they're similar to the downsides of limerence. So first I will say, Limerence is characterized by a deep search for meaning in terms of overanalyzing any potential signs of what the object of their attention might feel about them. But they can lead to damaged relationships with significant others, antisocial behaviors, self-harm, rumination. We were talking about stalking.
That's right.
And they're related to, PTSD, ADHD. They can come up with some OCD tendencies. And so there's a really interesting, dual diagnosis aspect to, a person in deep limerence, which limerence can last for 1 to 7 years. So it's almost like a chronic aggressive crush.
That's a great way of putting it.
Because it's not a crush. There's this new objectification of the limerent. It's literally called a limerent object. It's not a person.
Yeah.
And it's almost like if parasocially, it would look like, okay, now I need to get this person's attention and I will do anything to get their attention because I can no longer live without reciprocity. And so would you say, is reciprocity so essential to the parasocial relationship that when you try to break that barrier, it's no longer parasocial?
That's very interesting. So when the, wall of reciprocity is broken.
Yeah.
Let's just cite an example, someone runs on stage.
Yes.
I'm your biggest fan,
Totally.
like Michael
or
Jackson.
When Ariana Grande, 2 weeks ago, so she was at a Wicked premiere and a fan broke through the barrier.
That's right.
And Cynthia Erivo was pissed.
That's right. Where that, obviously that's maladaptive, but where it really becomes maladaptive is now you expect reciprocity where no reciprocity can exist. Because let's say you break that barrier. She sees you. Michael Jackson sees you. Now what? Now are you going to engage in a reciprocal relationship? Certainly not.
No.
So if it, has devolved to the point of expecting reciprocity and not only expecting it but longing for it and seeking it, it's definitely become maladaptive because it can never ascend past that.
Yeah.
It can never be anything but that.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's already such a significant power imbalance. And that's something we haven't talked about.
You're totally right.
We feel like we're in control in a parasocial relationship, but we are only in control of how much attention and devotion we're throwing at them.
That's a great point.
And so we're investing into this emptiness, and the other person is actually the one in so much control because, if we sent messages or DM'd them a ton, this is why it's always strange when somebody gets into a relationship with their celebrity crush. Because you already have a lot invested and a fantastical image of them.
Yeah.
And so the power differential can almost never go away.
That's a great point. You said something that completely jogged my memory on something very interesting. This is a complete, kind of arm of this area of research that we've talked about. But we've been very interested in how parasocial relationships predict investment, both time and monetarily. You see people buying tickets for crazy prices, merchandise, whatever else it may be. So you're absolutely right. There's such an imbalance.
Yeah.
To where you think, and you're right, you think, this is on my time, I'm investing however much I want, I'm pulling out my wallet and buying this shirt, or whatever. I'm spending the time. But in reality, and oftentimes with a lot of these, influencers, it is all so calculated to get people like you to engage in just those behaviors, those parasocial behaviors.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. We have used the investment model of commitment.
I love it.
A couple times here, just in talking about, there's research that shows that when you have a higher level of investment in a relationship, you're actually more likely to confess if you experience feelings for somebody else.
Huh.
And it's all about that level of investment, right? You're willing to take a risk, even monetarily, because you have a higher level of investment and thus commitment.
Right. I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
The investment model. I went down that rabbit hole a little bit. I was looking, in what ways do parasocial relationships mimic reciprocal relationships? And the investment model is one such way. Only one of the sort of pillars of the investment model doesn't hold up, and it's the perception of quality of alternatives.
Yeah.
Because, this is just my sort of hypothesis, but people don't expect that their parasocial relationships are just them. You know, they know there's other people, right? They know it's a shared relationship.
Yeah.
So therefore, they're not really driven by the thought of
it's just me and them.
Right.
Wow.
Right. And
That's
therefore,
fascinating.
there's no thought to the quality of alternatives.
Oh, it's so interesting.
So
and
glad you mentioned
that's
that.
when, you know, that's when you brought up like religion almost being this parasocial relationship, and it's like it's this full community engaging with this intangible other that never reciprocates. And it's just so fascinating. I feel like my team is really enjoying this, and so I kind of from here want to let them just like come up and ask you some questions, if that's okay. Normally we do like a debrief, me and them, but since we have you here, if that's okay for them to ask you some questions.
Perfectly.
One of the things you mentioned was LGBT teens or LGBT teens, I think you said.
You're right. It's a bit of a
incredible.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay, so are there certain demographics or even potentially geographical locations in which parasocial relationships are more likely to arise? Specifically within the context of what you were saying, it made me wonder, like, okay, is a small rural town person who's in the closet and maybe does not have that same ability to openly express themselves and find that level of relationship, are they more likely to develop a parasocial relationship when compared to their counterpart in, you know, a blue state, big city where there's more people
Right.
and they're perhaps easier for them to be out?
First of all, I love that question because you talk about geographical location. You know, that seems so relevant. And the short answer is I don't know about location specifically. What I can say, and this study is so fascinating. This study to me, with these LGBT teens, it's sort of like doesn't roll off the tongue. LGBT teens, this really blew it open for me because it provided evidence that they help in the it depends context. Parasocial relationships help in the maybe context.
Right.
You know, it's not a yes or no. It's not yes they do. It's not no they don't. It's like, well, maybe if the context is right. And specifically in these teens, you know, compared to heterosexual teens, they found that engagement in parasocial relationships was predicted the same across the board. A number of domains, say like mere exposure, things like that. But only in the LGB group, only in the LGBT teenagers, were they driven to their relationship by their loneliness as a result of, you know, their identity and literally, again, this literally is the operative word here, like literally lacking those potential connections. They're just not there.
Yeah.
You know, they're not even there in the first place. It's not like they're abstaining from them or
Right.
they're too shy. They're just not there.
Interesting.
And unsurprisingly, who are the parasocial relationships they're engaging in? LGBT media personas.
Right.
Which is so cool. It makes
Fascinating.
perfect sense.
So, and it's interesting you bring that up because that actually kind of segues nicely into my next question, which is one of the things that you had mentioned was parasocial relationships can't replace the real thing, which is comforting, right?
Right.
Certainly. But it does make me wonder a bit, is there any risk / is there any evidence that by being in a parasocial relationship, there is almost like an opportunity cost in the sense that a person who might otherwise feel a need or obligation or desire to go out and form, you know, meaningful relationships with someone in person, that because they have a certain level of fulfillment from the parasocial relationships, it sort of decreases the urgency with which they would otherwise go seek those things.
That's a good question. So the early studies in this parasocial phenomenon are so fascinating because they kind of took the face value, the intuitive, what you would expect.
Yeah.
Sure. You know, people that seek out parasocial relationships because they lack these connections in real life, they're going to stay that way. They're not going to build these connections. They're going to build these. And contrarily, you know, if they're well connected in their social life, they're not going to seek out a parasocial relationship. Why would they?
Right.
Okay, fair enough. But now what we see is it is the exact opposite, where people who are socially successful, well-connected, pro-social, whatever you will, are overwhelmingly the ones seeking out parasocial relationships.
Really? Interesting.
It completely negates everything I thought coming into it. So it's like, take like an average day.
Sure.
Friends, well-connected, lunch, you know, whatever. They have lots of relationships and they're fulfilled by the relationships. They go home, engage in their parasocial relationship as well. lonely people not engaging
Right.
reciprocally and not engaging parasocially on
Interesting.
average.
And that does sort of conform with one of the things you had mentioned, which is, that parasocial relationships aren't necessarily being found with low-leading people because they won't even engage with those. That's really interesting, though. That's not what I would have
No,
kind
it's
of
not,
intuitively thought, but
It's almost like a let's keep these good vibes going.
100%.
let's keep these good
100%.
vibes going, Maddie says.
And anecdotes are
Hell yeah.
Anecdotes are not evidence, but I will cite an anecdote. I know somebody who's very extroverted, very fulfilled by their relationships, and they're absolutely in a parasocial relationship. I can see it plain as day, and I just see it and I think that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Fascinating. That's super, super interesting.
It seems so counterintuitive.
Yeah,
It's
it really
not
does,
what I
because
expected.
that's my initial thought was like, oh, of course you would have this parasocial relationship as essentially a stopgap between what's needed in a person's life. But I guess perhaps if it's a byproduct of certain tendencies or personality traits, that maybe it's just if you're not having one, you're not having the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Okay, so I only have, because I would like for Eva to hit the mic.
I was just going to say, oh,
Yes, so I'm only going to ask one more. You mentioned when they take on sort of a maladaptive quality. The example I think you used was like Michael Jackson or some
Right.
celebrity, pop star, whomever. Does that change when we talk about parasocial relationships and reciprocity when it comes to things like streamers, which is something that's a lot more prominent nowadays,
Right.
where it's not just a sort of aspirational faraway object like a star in the sky, right? It's a person that might answer you in a chat or whatever, right? Is that still falling under the umbrella of a parasocial relationship? And if so, how are those kind of treated differently when compared to the example you used?
That's a really good question, because there's research there, and I'm interested in it. I haven't gone down the rabbit hole, but
Okay.
what I can say is, traditional parasocial relationships, say with your favorite actor, clearly, strictly, non-reciprocal.
Right.
That is what it is.
Right.
And then you have, parasocial relationship with a chatbot, where it is literally responding to you. So actually, maybe it's not parasocial because it's reciprocal. But then, in my opinion, you have this gray area of a streamer,
Right.
where it's parasocial to be sure, but there can be reciprocity.
Right.
They address your chat. They even say, hey, so-and-so, welcome,
Yeah.
And to me, it's a gray area where I think it becomes more reciprocal and therefore something other than parasocial.
Okay. So it's the reciprocity element that essentially moves it out of the umbrella of being a parasocial
It is
relationship.
exactly that. That
Fascinating.
to me sort of disqualifies it from being parasocial
Yeah.
when there's reciprocity.
Super interesting. I mean, when I think of parasocial relationships, at least prior to this, I think walking out of this, my finding on parasocial relationships will be very different. That's literally what I think of first, is like people donating to like a streamer or whatever, and then being like, hey, thanks,
Right.
So super interesting. As a streamer myself, I wish. Okay. Thank you so much for answering all my questions.
you.
We're going to throw it to Eva now.
You talked about the parasocial as guaranteed and definite, and how that provides stability for people. I kind of felt the opposite. To me, the parasocial was you don't have a say over the relationship. You engage on it on your own terms in terms of when you look at it, but in terms of what they put out in the world, you have nothing to do with that. You don't say when they will make a movie, and not to say that you do with a crush, but in terms of, I just thought it isn't so much on your terms as it is in day to day, because you don't have any influence. So is that definite?
Well, here's what I would say. It can be as definite as you want it to be. Because let's say, you've had a great relationship with Taylor Swift to this point in time.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow she comes out and she says something heinous that you disagree with.
Yeah.
That can be hard to overcome.
Yeah.
But you can forever have access to the content and the material that was Taylor Swift to that point in time. It's the same way with the passing. We were talking about this earlier. When Chester Bennington took his life in 2017. There's a professor who at the time was in grad school and was actually working as a counselor on campus at a school. And people were coming in and, of course, were heartbroken, just as you would be in like a real reciprocal relationship. But Chester Bennington can always live on in the form of his interviews, his music videos, whatever material was out there. Now, you're right. It can be hard to overcome. I mean, what if they did say something that you completely disagree with, that you can't, that's completely problematic? Or what if they do pass away and it's hard to get over that?
Yeah.
But there's always that fragment, however big or small, of material that did get you invested. And that's always there.
You talked about this theory at the beginning of our brain circuitry and how our brain could potentially be perceiving parasocial relationships and in-person relationships the same. Now, what I had to wonder about that was, doesn't the brain process the difference in a body in front of you? Like, isn't there something to be said about sensing a flat screen, two-dimensional, versus like a very four-dimensional person? You can smell them, you can reach out and touch them. What do you think the influences of the actual senses on that brain circuitry and your ability to perceive that relationship?
I would say, first of all, I'm with you. It defies to me all logic that a media-mediated person should be perceived the same as face-to-face. That defies all logic to me.
Yeah.
But, and I'll tie in what you mentioned earlier, like the power of the idea, the power of the imagination, for someone to be sitting in that, or rather, for someone to not be sitting in that chair, but to be able to conjure up the feelings, real like neurological response such that someone is there, I think speaks to really the power of the imagination.
Yeah,
more than
truly.
anything.
I guess, and the emotional resolve that can result from just imagining them.
That's a great way of putting it, the emotional resolve. And again, like, logically, like, the more I think about it, the less it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
Especially when we know we're looking at a computer screen.
Right.
Our higher self, any old person knows that.
Right.
And yet. Maybe, some of it could have to do with how we anthropomorphize things.
True.
Which we do with computers.
True. We'll assign it to a rock.
100%.
Yeah.
We give them all these values and everything, but.
Yeah, we care about them deeply.
We do. We gave rocks eyes and names in the 80s. And but that's neither here nor there.
One time I carried around a watermelon when I was like 7 years old. I pushed it
Parasocial
around
watermelon.
in a baby stroller for about 4 weeks. And then it began to rot, and I gave it a burial. And I mourned.
That's parasocial.
Its name was Waddy, thank you.
So,
That.
you might find this encouraging. There's studies on parasocial relationships with plants.
Really?
So
what about watermelon?
So you're adjacent there with your watermelon relationship. You're adjacent.
Cut to Maddie becoming the plant. That's beautiful. Thank you for telling me that, because I really did feel emotionally very connected to that watermelon.
I hope that feels validating, because we shouldn't
actually.
think
Also,
that.
the tree huggers.
Yeah, we shouldn't think they're just
True.
limited to the digital media realm.
But
True.
The trees and plants can actually have, like.
Would you
good
call that something
responses.
different than parasocial, or would that still be classified as
The plants
parasocial?
technically react. They become healthier when we interact with them.
That's true. And when we put the music on, when we speak positive words to them, the plants do better.
And when
So,
we, like, make out with them.
okay, so you with that plant
We.
later. Back to it.
Using we real loosely. I don't know who we is.
Surely we. Like, what is your thoughts on how the brain is tailored to respond to like the actual physical body in front of us?
That's interesting. It's verging on philosophical. That's interesting. This is my opinion, so I don't know that this is true or not. But this is actually the angle I took in my paper, which was due tonight. So I made sure to submit it before we got here.
Cheers, brother.
Yeah. So, I took the angle that we're so social.
Yeah.
We have such this deeply rooted need for being social.
Yeah.
That
truly.
we'll seek that and find that anywhere we can.
Okay. Yeah, we will. We do often.
And we do.
Yeah. So that's the root of it for you is the need to socialize, and we'll do it with what's available to us.
Exactly.
Okay.
We'll give a rock a name.
That was so fun. Did you enjoy being questioned?
It's great.
Being on the stand by a lawyer and a dancer?
Imagine that.
slash neuroscience major. Yeah, guess which one is which. Who's the lawyer of the two of them? I would have you answer, please.
I'll answer. I'm not sure.
Okay, before we let you go, I know we didn't go through the full extent of the crush assessment, but I loved the way that our conversation went, and with my associates as well. This was just wonderful. So we have one final question that we ask every single person. I know you mentioned that your current active crush is on your partner of 4 years.
Uh-huh.
So the question we would like to ask you is, would you like to call your crush?
I'm sorry to dampen the mood, which has just risen to an uproarious level, but I will not be calling my crush.
Okay. Jake, thank you for coming on Crush Pod.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. This was so fun. I feel like we're already going to need to have you back in season 2.
I would hope.
Yeah.
I would be here.
I think there's going to be a lot of
Okay.
follow-up questions within all of us and whoever listens to
Hopefully
this.
I've learned something more by then. And I
Yes.
can contribute a little more.
Yes, and year 2. Exciting.
Yeah,
All right. Well, any last words?
Thank you for having me. You guys are a joy.
Cheers.